Hey, this week we start out with a fun review of OpenSUSE and the Warp Terminal, and then we talk about something fun coming to Pipewire. There's a look at Canonical's performance, Canonical's birthday, and some NTFS stuff that's coming and leaving the Linux kernel. There's Wayland news, there's GPU news, and an interesting little operating system called Zorin OS that's been around for maybe longer than you think. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 142, recorded Saturday, March 9th. Linux in Bing mode. Hey folks, welcome. It is Saturday. You know what that means. It's time to get geeky. It's the Untitled Linux Show, and I've got the regular crew. We're all here, and we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk about Linux. We're going to talk about what's new in the news for open source and for our kind of people, the geeks and the Linux users out there. And you are welcome to come along. And we're going to start with Rob. And I think Rob has something of a review for us, maybe a double-ender review. Rob, what you got?
Yeah, so I'm going to tell you all about a little bit about what I've been up to the past few weeks. Because I've been teasing for a while that I've switched my main desktop computer to OpenSUSE Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed being their rolling release distribution. And after about a month, I think, of using it, I'm going to tell you my experience. First, before I installed on my main machine, I thought I'd take a look at the KDE on OpenSUSE on a VM. I used to love KDE for years and switched away a couple of years ago. But since the other guys here still seem to love it, I thought I'd give it another shot, try to remember what the love was all about. So my first impression of their default install of KDE is, ew, I didn't like it. I thought the default look was horrid. I know KDE tends to look a lot like Windows, but the default install even had the Windows 98 gray color to it. Maybe it's 95, I can't remember, but it looked like that old style gray. I thought I'd jump back in time about 25 years, which would have been fine if my body would have followed that jump back in time 25 years also. Well, that ugliness, it's easy enough to configure out, but it just wasn't the clean GNOME I have gotten used to. So I installed the GNOME version and that looked like a vanilla install of GNOME. So I went with that on my desktop. The installer was your typical easy to install, like all Linuxes these days, except for Arch and Gentoo or Linux from scratch. Nothing complicated there. Once I started using it, the most important thing I noticed is everything just worked. My Steam games worked without any tinkering. Wayland worked right out of the box. I didn't even realize I was actually running Wayland. But when I checked and looked, I was running Wayland. Right now, my OBS Studio is streaming to you from my OpenSUSE install with Wayland. And OpenSUSE just works great. The cool thing I found with the package manager zipper that I talked about a few weeks ago is it can figure out if you type a wrong package. From my tip later today, I had to install npm. I did a zipper search npm and found the package I needed. It was like npm dash something, whatever, I don't remember now. But even though I searched it up, my brain didn't even listen, and I just typed zipper install npm. Even though I just went through the trouble of looking it up, it told me it was there. But anyway, I did that, and the package name, even though the package name was something else, it said, "Oh, we think you want to install this package, do you?" And I said yes, and it installed the right stuff, or these packages, because there's a couple dependencies. Potential downsides I noticed, and they are minor. If you are using if you're used to a ton of new packages every week when you update your system, like you see on Arch, for some reason, I'm not seeing that in OpenSUSE. I don't see a lot of packages. It seems my average is around 5, give or take, where Arch, I just have a ton of them every week when I update. Maybe some things are bundled and buried, and I just didn't notice it because one of the updates is just labeled system update. So maybe that includes all of those. And in Arch, I see them all individually. Maybe that's the discrepancy I'm seeing there. The next thing I've noticed is whenever one of the updates is a system update, after a reboot, you get the annoying screen saying your system is updating. Please don't power off your computer or whatever. Similar to what I've seen in Fedora and Windows. Arch apparently does this while the system is running or something, because in Arch, I would just reboot and it'd be the same reboot as always. So I'm not sure how they do that differently, but it does bring back a little PTSD of Windows days when I see that on there. But it's not a big deal, really. Well, except for the fact that it's tumbleweed and I see it like every week almost. But anyway, my understanding is, even though OpenSUSE Tumbleweed is a rolling release, I think they maybe test their packages a little more than like Arch, which is probably why it still seems very stable for a rolling distro. So my conclusion, if you want the latest software from a rolling release that just works, OpenSUSE Tumbleweed is an awesome choice. Now next, unless anyone wants to interject there, the next thing I was going to talk about briefly is Warp Terminal. After I showed a demo or I said a news story on the show about it coming to Linux, after the show, I thought I'd give it a try. And my quick review is, I could see the pound and, where you hit pound, describe what you want to do, being good for beginners. But it's not something I could see myself really using. It's just not in my normal go-to. But, if you're new and you have that quick and handy there, I could see it being okay. The AI assistant is okay, but it doesn't seem close to like Chat GPT or Copilot. It could help you out, but and I didn't like something. There's something about the general feel of the terminal that I can't quite place. But if you want to try it, go for it. But it isn't the dream AI I had hoped for. And finally, on my bucket list that I've been wanting to do for a while is to install Gentoo. So this week, I have started to set that up. And all I have to say so far is you Gentoo users are crazy. I like Arch, setting it up. I can do that in 30 minutes. Gentoo. So Gentoo, it's like a cross between Arch and Linux from scratch. You have the Gentoo wiki you follow, just like the Arch wiki, but I don't think it's as good as the Arch wiki. I was questioning things and got to a point where I had to take a break. But you set up your system from scratch. You download what they call their stage 3 file, similar to when you install the base for Arch. Then it goes all the way to being more like Linux from scratch, where you set your compile flags and then you compile. And I got to the part where I was going to set my compile flags. And I'm like, I don't know what I want to set here. I just wanted to go. So I got that far. I may keep going. I may not. Next on my bucket list is NixOS though, NixOS. So maybe I might dump Gentoo and go to NixOS. I don't know, but
sort of sounds to me like for science you need to finish it and get a working Gentoo install.
I do, and it's not like it's on a VM. It's not like I'm gonna wipe or kill it. I just don't know if I have the heart to really go back to it right now.
Understandable.
Just small.
When are you going to try MX?
I've already tried MX Linux.
Been there, done that.
The SUSE is pronounced Susa. It's like the song. It rhymes with Appaloosa.
Not the people I hang out with.
According to the project themselves, it's Sousa, like the American band author. I've interviewed them before. They were pretty precise about it.
Well, I don't hang out with those people, so they're German.
That's probably true.
I'm not. Well, I am. I have some in me. But
there you go. So OpenSUSE, you're running KDE. Is that KDE 6?
It was not KDE 6 yet. When I tested it, KDE 6 was not available, but I believe I've seen stories that it is now.
Yep. Just need a better theme to start with to get you away from that Windows gray.
Yeah, I don't know why. Why would you pick that? I complained on a group I was in about that, and some people, it's like nostalgia. Some people like that thing. Some people like how Windows looks.
I suppose that's true.
And you're the Windows guy.
Yeah. Perfect fit.
Yeah.
Microsoft. I bring Microsoft into the stories, not necessarily Windows.
Not necessarily Windows. All right. Well, I have got a story, and it is so far a Twitter story, which is interesting. So one of the things that we've talked about from time to time is Pipewire, and one of the things that still is missing, at least for me in Pipewire, is FireWire support and FFADO. So this theoretically exists, but the developer from Pipewire, Wim Taemans, has said in the past, he doesn't actually have any of the old FireWire hardware that would use the FFADO driver to actually test with, and therefore it's been sort of broken for quite a while. Well, I've sort of jokingly offered in the past to send some. It seems that someone actually did it. It looks like the user @VenStone actually did it, sent some hardware over to Wim Taemans, boxed it up and said, here, let me send this to you. And it's I think it's a Focusrite like Sapphire 14, something like that, but piece of FireWire hardware. And just recently, there is a tweet here from Christian Schaller, who I believe is also working on the Pipewire project. Officially, Pipewire FFADO MIDI support is done in Pipewire. Just need the official VenStone seal of approval, and we are set to go. So just a quick story here about, for those handful of us, and I'm sure that there's not actually very many of us, but there's a few that would love to be able to use the old FireWire FFADO stuff with Pipewire. It's coming. Finally. It's happening. Some neat stuff there, and just one more place to get the bugs knocked off of Pipewire. Excited to see.
I have an old camera around somewhere with Pipewire on it, but I haven't used it in probably a decade, and I don't have a FireWire port on my computer right now either.
Yeah, I don't know that we're ever going to see Pipewire support for FireWire cameras. Maybe, but probably not.
For
they're so
FireWire
old.
CD players?
Probably not. Maybe.
I don't. The only FireWire things I've ever owned were all cameras. I've never owned anything else FireWire. So
there for a while, the pro audio equipment, if you wanted to get a piece of pro audio equipment that connected to a computer, it was FireWire. Because it was just better than USB back in the day. We are now at the point to where almost everything is USB, and it's moving towards USB-C. But there for a while, FireWire was the game in town. And so it's kind of nice because some of it's old, but still really nice equipment. You're talking about 8 decent preamps on it, 20 channels in, 20 channels out. You can chain it with an optical cable to get 8 more preamps on it. So a lot of input and output. And there's, well, for one thing, if you've put a lot of money into this setup, then it would be nice to be able to use it with the newest and greatest Linux technology. So personally, I think there's still quite a reason. I think it's worth it to try to make the FFADO stuff work with Pipewire.
Yeah.
It's worse than keeping FireWire working with Linux after investing all that money.
Yeah, and we've got a developer that has promised to work on FireWire and Linux through like 2029, I think. Got another 5 years, something like that.
Yeah, but my cell phone probably takes better video than my FireWire camera did anyway now.
Well, yeah, but we're not really talking about your FireWire camera. We're talking about FireWire audio, which can do, top of the line. Still, they don't make audio equipment that's any better than like 96K and what 32-bit, and you can do that over FireWire. So, and that's kind of the point, right? So, camera equipment is still getting better and better. Audio equipment, we've kind of reached the peak of what human ears can hear. So there's not going to be a whole lot of, we're not pushing the boundary with audio equipment. We've already arrived. And so it's at the point where there is this older stuff that's still very useful.
Yeah, and so that's pretty much what I was saying. It's like, I guess it's fine that it doesn't work with my old camera because I don't really need to use my old camera because it's old.
It's old, yes. It's definitely not.
And it's not used.
It's used.
The 192 hertz with 24 or 32-bit. A lot of that's even just for editing, so you have headroom when you're manipulating the signal, because that's where it matters, not that you're going to hear it.
Yep.
I definitely wouldn't hear it.
All right, let's talk about Canonical. Jeff, take it away.
Canonical, the parent company behind Ubuntu, is looking to put performance tools into Ubuntu 24.04 by default. So at this point, it's simply a proposal and not a sure thing. Canonical engineers are wanting to put various tools into the long-term support release to try to help people who want to take the time and tune and make sure their system will run at its peak performance. Why just a proposal at this point? Well, it's because it would increase the size by a not insignificant amount. So Canonical has recently been pushing for performance on the Linux desktop. So this isn't an unexpected proposal. Late last year, they turned on frame pointers, which helps monitoring performance and debugging. They also built a version of Ubuntu with the level 3 microarchitecture features in it to just see how enabling modern CPU full instruction set would help the release. So even, Canonical's even officially stated they're pushing for more Linux performance. So, this falls in line with that. So this isn't like it's totally out of the blue. Officially, the proposal is, and this is a quote from them, or a snippet, include performance and profiling tools by default on Ubuntu 24.04, classic, not core. In talking about what we could do in Ubuntu 24.04 to make Ubuntu absolutely great for performance engineers, a key suggestion was to include this tool by default. Now, some of the packages to be installed are Systat, NUMA, Control, CTL, BPFCC tools, BPF trace, trace command, IP route to ETH tool, and that's just a few of them. They're basically going to be the most common debugging and performance tracing tools. The downside is the overall ISO image would go up about 120 megabytes, while the install size would grow over 500 megabytes. The biggest question on this is, while seemingly like a good idea, is why installed by default? The issue's been raised that while 100% of the people downloading the ISO will never, the issue has been raised that while 100% of the people downloading the ISO will have increased bandwidth usage, only a small amount of these people actually use these tools, as some of them are rather advanced. The BPFCC tools and BPF trace, which depend on each other, are actually the majority of the size increase. Now, it's been brought up to leave those out and include the rest, as the rest only give a 4 megabyte increase in the ISO, so it's not too bad. Also brought up is, if you're working to get the most out of your Ubuntu install, you probably already know what tool you need to, what tools to install, and to do that you can just install them yourself since they're in the repository. So it's not like anybody's got to really go searching and try hard to get these into their distribution. There's even talk about Performance Tools meta package to install all the programs and their dependencies if you want them. Or individual installs are always an option as well, if so desired. For people that don't know, meta packages are kind of like a wrapper around packages. So when you install a program, and maybe it depends on many other things, other actual packages, not just dependencies, that's a good way to kind of wrap everything up into a neat little package. So you just install the one package and it installs everything you need. But, in my opinion, I don't think they should be included by default. The only things that should be default are the dependencies that have to be compiled into the kernel, and things like that where it has to be kind of built into the system. It's trivial and I think our audience will know it's trivial to install packages in Linux. So I think leaving them out, but having a wrapper package to install them would be the best thing. Any thoughts from my wonderful co-hosts?
Yeah, it's fascinating. The only thing that comes to mind is, are there people that need these tools that aren't going to be connected to the internet? And I have trouble imagining that, particularly since a lot of those tools are network connectivity tools. It seems odd to put them in by default.
And if you're in that level of performance and tuning and you're not connected to the internet, how to download those packages and put them on your system and then run it through the installer locally.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, and I agree. That makes sense that it's probably not from the majority of people, but all they have to do is put a check marks on the check box, I guess, on the installer and say install performance stuff too. But
that's another good way.
They want to seem to just completely minimize that. You have your minimal and you have your full, and that's all you get.
There's no custom.
What's that?
There's no custom option.
There's very little. There's some, you can select like non-free repositories and, non-open source programs that you can install, but there's not a ton. When you're installing like an Ubuntu, there's not a ton of package customizations.
Yeah, not like it used to be.
It used to be quite.
It's been a while since I've done a full install from the ISO. Have to do that again here soon.
Yeah.
Just to sit and remember what it's like.
Well, we are on the precipice of the transition from kernel 6.8 to kernel 6.9. And while there's some fun things in 6.8, Ken here has some stories about what is coming in 6.9. Ken, what did you find?
Well, I found that Michael Laravel had written about some possible changes to the upcoming Linux 6.9 kernel cycle. We may see improved performance from Microsoft engineer Christian Bronner's VFS miscellaneous pull request, including enhancing the case-insensitive code. Christian explained, and here I'm quoting him, finally merged the case-insensitive improvement series Gabriel has been working on for a long time. This cleanly propagates case-insensitive operations through S_D_op, which in turn allows us to remove the quite ugly generic _sit _encrypted _ci _d _ops function operations.
Encrypted indeed.
It also improves performance by trying a case-sensitive comparison first and then fall back to case-insensitive lookup if that fails. This also fixes a bug where overlay FS would be able to be mounted over a case-insensitive directory, which would lead to all sorts of odd behaviors. This code also has various bug fixes and other code improvements. Now, in another article Michael wrote, Christian Bronner also submitted a VSF NTFS pull request that nukes the old NTFS driver. Don't worry, it's the old one, not the new one. He states, this removes the old NTFS, try saying that fast 3 times, NTFS driver. The new NTFS NTFS3 driver is a full replacement that was merged over 2 years ago. We've went through various user space, and either they use NTFS3 or they use the Fuse version of NTFS, and thus build neither NTFS nor NTFS3. I think that's a clear sign that we should risk removing the legacy NTFS driver. He also states it's unmaintained apart from various odd fixes as well. Worst case, we have to reintroduce it if someone really has a valid dependency on it. But it's worth trying to see whether we can remove it. Michael also mentions removing this legacy NTFS kernel driver lightens the Linux source tree by 29,303 lines. You can read Michael's article for what I left out.
Fun. That is a bunch of lines of code to get rid of all at once.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we're going to make a mistake and remove something you're not supposed to.
It's easy enough with Git to do a revert and then a retry.
Yeah.
Git is great. Well, that's fun. Yeah, the new NTFS driver, NTFS3, is pretty good. I'm not sure that I even knew that there were still two NTFS drivers kicking around in the kernel. Seems like an easy win, and I imagine that they will probably go for this unless of course somebody steps up and says, no, I depend upon that. And then
need the read-only capability.
Yeah.
I remember the days. Seems like it wasn't that long ago you couldn't even write to NTFS. But
well, there's always been a bit of catch up when Microsoft pushes a new Windows version, because they'll do fun, fancy things on top of NTFS, and it takes a little bit of time for the Linux driver to catch up and understand how to read it. So there is that, but it's done pretty well. And hilariously, I think we've gotten to the point now where I believe the Microsoft devs will actually send pull requests in to fix that stuff to be able to read NTFS in the kernel.
Makes sense now that they have their own Linux distribution. Previously, CBL Mariner being renamed as Azure Linux, but
yeah. So we have a file system related question from the chat room. Actually, Quippy wants to know, what's the best file system to use for formatting my USB stick for a clean Linux install? FAT32, NTFS, etc. And I'm going to say, if you only want to read it on Linux, go ext4. But if it needs to be readable between both Linux and Windows machines, probably NTFS. Any thoughts?
Sometimes
I would recommend
FAT32 works really well.
It depends on the size.
That's true.
Right, but a lot of tools kind of default to FAT32.
That's true. That is also true.
If it's going to be like less than 2 terabytes, then FAT32. If it's more than 2 terabytes, then NTFS.
Is it 2 terabytes? Is that the FAT32 max size?
It's if it's that much.
No, it's 4 gigabytes. FAT32 max is at 4 gigabytes. 2 terabytes sounds like a whole lot. So if it's bigger than 4 gigs, then FAT32 is not going to do it. Now, FAT32 is important for things like BIOS updates. Many machine BIOSes only know how to read FAT32 to be able to grab an update off of. So it's still important for things like that. But I will maintain. Oh, and David and other people are asking, what about exFAT? I am not as familiar with exFAT as the others. I know that is another one of those newer file system types that's supposed to be a replacement for FAT32. I guess that's what extended FAT is. That what that stands for? So the extended file allocation table.
Is that the one that goes to goes up to 2 terabytes?
That might be.
Now I believe you're wrong about the FAT32. File sizes can't be over 4 gigabytes, but the file system itself can be a theoretical limit of 16 terabytes.
Oh, 4 gigabyte files. That's right. Okay.
Which is why
I stand corrected.
Which is why I believe usually USB drives default to FAT32, because if you want to go across multiple operating systems from Windows, Linux, Mac OS, or be able to be read easily anywhere. FAT32 is usually the default.
Even OS2?
I don't know about OS2. So now that you say that about the maximum file size being 4 gigs, yes, that is a thing. One of my customers became my customers because the previous IT guy set them up with a Windows backup that was backing up to a FAT32. And the way Windows backup works is it makes one big file. And so they had the first 4 gigabytes of their backup, which was about 10 years old by the time that they finally needed it. It was not good. It was not good. Yeah. All right. Let's is it time to say goodbye? Don't make me sing it. Don't make me channel my inner Bocelli. Is it time to say goodbye to WSA?
Sing it, Jonathan. So I know a lot of you listeners probably don't like to consider Android as a Linux operating system. It's kind of like the stepbrother you don't want to claim. But Android runs the Linux kernel, so it is our brother. Even though I am not an avid Windows user, regardless of what Jeff tries to tell everyone, well, I do use it quite a bit at work. Not on my... It's not my personal choice, I guess. I guess I'm plenty familiar with Windows. I won't lie. But anyway, it was still a pretty cool. It was still a pretty cool idea when they only announced this back in 2021, and that's the WSA, or the Windows subsystem for Android. You know, their goofy naming systems they have. So they announced it back in 2021 that it was coming to Windows, and it would allow you to run Android apps on Windows the same way as WSL allows you to run Linux on Windows. The first public preview of WSA was only released 2 years ago, and I haven't had a chance to even try that yet because I don't run Windows as much as you guys think. But I was planning to try it someday once it matured. Well, that child is never going to get a chance to grow up, as Microsoft has announced they are ending support for WSA. It sounds like the Amazon App Store that provided Android apps to WSA was removed on March 5th. So even if I wanted to try it now, I don't even have the opportunity. I wish I would have loved to have tried it out just to see if it's as bad as Microsoft apparently thinks it is. But if you do have it installed, if you have any Android apps installed from the store, those will still continue to work and still be supported for another year. But after that, they are ending support on March 5th, 2025. They say WSA never really caught on in popularity like WSL did. And I think the biggest reason is the limitation of apps. I think that is a huge reason of it. At least That's kind of something I was waiting for. The only way to get Android apps was from the Amazon App Store. And for anyone that owns or has ever owned an Amazon Fire tablet, that just isn't a great experience. So I guess I'd always hoped that once it matured, more options would be open to us. Maybe someday they get the Play Store on there, or have their own store, or just somewhere you could get better apps. But that's not happening. But thankfully for us Linux users, we still have Waydroid.
Yeah, I think the lack of the Play Store is really what made this a non-starter. And you've got to remember that Google is very, very possessive of the Play Store. They actually, Google services in the Google Play Store is actually the stick that Google carries. And I guess maybe also the carrot, one could say. But when you talk about how Google controls the Android ecosystem, it is that process of here are the things that you need to do with your devices to be able to officially use the trademark Android, but also pre-install things like the Play Store and Google services. And I don't think there's ever really much of a chance that Google is going to say, yes, Microsoft, you could put that on Windows. It's great. No. too much competitors for that to ever happen, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose if they ever were to make that exception, that it would open it up to other places that they just don't want to.
Yeah,
open it up to.
It kind of gives away. Well, it gives away their control, but it also gives people one less reason to have an Android tablet. If you can just have a shiny Windows Surface and play all your Android games on that, right?
Well, you can if you've got WSL running Waydroid.
Yeah, that's going to be 2 layers of emulation. That's going to be an interesting experience.
No worse than a 10-year-old phone.
Well,
you
probably
you can install Linux on a Surface tablet, though.
Yeah, you can. You can do that.
I do.
You're not running Windows anymore, though, unless you're using WSL.
There you go. Let's run Windows with WSL. On WSL, you run Waydroid.
Sure, you could.
Well,
that'd be an experience.
I'm just wondering how much do you guys want to run Android apps on something bigger? I mean, I don't know if I've ever said, man, I really wish I could run this on my PC or something,
There's a few instances where you might want to, where there is something that is Android only, and it would be really nice to be able to use it on a PC. But not a whole lot, yeah.
Not a lot. But
because it seems like anything I would have there's probably a PC program that's going to do it just as well or better than.
There are a lot of apps though that are only available mobile, such as smart home apps, the Casa Home or any of those. Those are almost all not available for the computer. And it's not like you need the big screen for it. You can run it in just a little area of your screen.
And what's even worse is some of those apps, if you've got a Chromebook and you've gotten used to being able to put Android apps on there, you got to put that one that says not compatible with this device.
Yeah.
But I was going to say also, my son, he's always playing games on his computer because he's 13 years old. And there's times where he wants to play a mobile game on his computer, and he's talked to me how to do it. I made him figure out himself, and there's like blue jeans, or I don't know, blue something. There's some emulator that's been around for a while, and lots of times they have the apps pretty much built in or directions how to do it. But
yeah, I remember back when I think it was Twitter. For the first time, they introduced the video streaming service. I forget what they called it, but the only way that you could connect to it then was through the Twitter mobile app. There was no way to stream over a desktop. There was no API. There was no endpoint to be able to connect OBS to. And so your options were real limited. So it's like you could either, if you wanted to do fancy stuff, like use a better camera and all that, you could camera to OBS and then pipe the output to a monitor and point your screen or your camera at the monitor, which we did that for a while and it was terrible. So, there's always a possibility that something like this would allow you to stream a higher quality audio and video stream over your Twitter app, let's say. So there are these edge cases where it makes sense.
Okay.
Azure Flash and the Discord reminded me that it is BlueStacks. And speaking of Blue Sky, I believe, is also only a mobile app. So if you wanted to use that,
isn't Blue Sky the Twitter alternative?
Yes. Mashed Potato gave me an invite, but now anybody can come in, so I'm not special anymore.
Not special anymore. All right. Let's talk about something special that is going on. Oh, this is interesting. So there's a lot of history here. So first off, George Hotz. You may know him as GeoHotz, the famous hacker of all things. I believe PlayStation is what he was the one doing. Yeah, interesting fellow. Been around for a long time in sort of that community. he is working on a new project, TinyGrad and TinyBox, and it's sort of open source artificial intelligence. But what they're looking at doing, and it's now the TinyCorp, however you want to pronounce that, is the company that he's working with. And from what I can tell, they are looking at this idea of building little small computers with GPUs in them for doing artificial intelligence and selling these boxes, like pre-built AI boxes. All right. And he tweeted, this has been several days ago, a couple weeks ago now, I think. He says, as it stands, I'm not okay with shipping the 7900 XTX platform. What should we do? We are not AMD's quality assurance team, and we have no relationship with them. I saw some stuff last year that gave me hope, but this platform has been out for 14 months now, and there's still serious issues. It upsets me that the MES isn't open source. While more stuff is open source than NVIDIA, if there's blobs, we do not own the hardware, and I don't feel great about investing time into this. So that part's interesting, but then he gets to the actual problem they ran into. He says, the compiler bug today is icing on the cake. At first, I thought it was the launch bounds feature, but it looks like it can be triggered even without that. Not being able to trust a compiler undermines so much trust in the entire platform. It would set us back, but maybe we should switch to either 3090s or the Intel GPUs. Either way, we aren't shipping the TinyBox or ordering bulk 7900 XTXs until this is figured out. He says, I'm sure AMD doesn't want these bugs either, but they are focused in the wrong place. They should immediately stop development of high-end ML machine learning libraries and fix their basic stuff. Their compiler and their drivers have bugs. Why would anyone spend a minute building on top of this until that stuff is addressed? It looks like it's a problem with testing methodology. Fuzzers would catch these issues. What a waste to invest in higher level crap until the basics are good. And then he says, if AMD open sources their firmware, I'll fix their LLVM spilling bug and write a fuzzer for HSA. Otherwise, it's not worth putting tons of effort into fixing bugs on a platform you don't own. Lisa, the AMD head honcho herself, Lisa Su, responded, thanks for the collaboration and feedback. We are all in to get you a good solution. The team is on it. So this is interesting. George Hotz happened to catch the attention of the AMD CEO herself. They had a call, and so this is the thing that happened most recently. He had a call with the AMD team, and he continues to say, call went pretty well. We are gating the commitment to the 6X 7900 XTX on a public release of a roadmap to get the firmware open sourced, and obviously the MLPerf training bug being fixed. He says, we aren't open source purists. It doesn't matter to us if the HDCP stuff is open, for example, but we need the scheduler and the memory hierarchy management to be open. This is what it takes to push the performance of neural networks. He says this particular demo should be possible on a TinyBox, but it requires, as he says, God-tier software and deep integration with the scheduler. We've also advised that the build process for AMD GPU DKMS should be more open. While the driver itself is open, we haven't found it easy to rebuild and install. Easy REPL cycle is a key driver for community open source. We want the firmware to be easy to build and install also. And then he says, should have a go or no-go decision by the end of the week. Confidence 70%. So, interesting stuff here. And I'm looking, I have not seen anything up to date beyond this. And we are now at the end of the week. So this is March 6th that this news came out. And I've not seen anything since then. I'm still looking. But I think it's really fascinating that someone, big enough to get some attention is complaining about some of the same things that we little guys are trying to do AMD machine learning. Some of it is difficult to build. Not enough of it is open sourced. And I see some real potential for things to get better. And I thought that was really interesting to see. And hopefully we will get an answer for too much longer. Hopefully we'll get some more stuff being open sourced. That would be cool.
Yeah, getting Lisa's attention, that's pretty That's pretty cool in and of itself. And
Yes.
I do want to say, working for, and I've worked for a couple different really big corporations,
Mhm.
having something like this by the end of the week and then it slips a few days, that's not uncommon. That's,
The CEO is not talking to the engineers when they say, well, we'll get this done by the end of the week.
yeah, there's a lot of, oh, wait, that person's on vacation or they're out today and we got to,
And or legal says, we can't do this by the end of the week. It's going to take at least a week and a half to review before you should have even said that.
Yes, exactly. So
Yes.
Not making the deadline, I wouldn't put any premonitions on what the answer is going to be or how it's going to go.
Yes, absolutely.
And I bet you will hear an update by the end of the week.
Maybe. Well, you might not even, though. There may not be an update by the end of the week. It may be several weeks. Like I said, it may be that legal is already mad at Lisa for having said that much. It's like, you shouldn't have even addressed this before you talked to legal. I can imagine that sort of thing happening again, because you're in big corporations and everything is restricted by NDAs and trademarks and patent law. And, there's a lot of moving pieces in a company that big.
Yeah.
So there is some advantages to being small.
Oh, yeah. You're a lot more nimble. For example, I've worked on projects where you have company A, company B, and then I'm in company C. And because there isn't a NDA across all of us, it only is between each individual. It's like, well, okay, we're working with company A on something. Oh, but they know information from company B, but they can't tell us that. We have to go, they have to say, well, you need to ask company B, and then we have to go ask them independently. And I cannot understate or overstate the amount of loops and legal stuff and all that kind of stuff that comes with being in a big company, and for good reason, because you can open yourself up to nasty lawsuits and whatnot, and because of it. But there is a reason why they talk about little companies being so much more nimble and quicker to react to things when
because they don't have to wear
one
suits.
person.
Hey now.
I said you choose to.
This talk is starting to remind me too much of work.
Well,
side note, I wear jeans to work. I don't wear a suit.
There you go. I have this wonderful compromise where I have a suit coat and dress shirt and then jeans below that. It's the best of
and
both
pajama pants on the bottom.
I may or may not have ever recorded a show in pajama pants. No further comment, Your Honor.
And on that note, I think there's more GPU news.
Jeff, why don't you take it away and tell us about the other team's open source news? Actually, pretty exciting to see.
Yes, it is. So NVIDIA has, a while back, we talked about how they released kernel modules and they're open source. Now, Phoronix did some benchmarking of these open source kernel parts of the NVIDIA driver. Now, before we start digging into performance numbers, I want to make sure everybody understands there's a few things. So the open kernel modules from NVIDIA are the open source code which NVIDIA released in 2022. This is not, I repeat, this is not the Nouveau driver. That's a separate open source project. So while they do learn from the open source code that NVIDIA released, this is not part of the story. So I want to make that clear up front. And NVIDIA also did not open everything up. So all the kernel side code is open, but user side code is not. So things like OpenGL, Vulkan, OpenCL, CUDA, those drivers remain closed source because they're all on the user side. So you kind of think of this new effort recent effort from NVIDIA, kind of like a middle ground between the full proprietary driver they have and the Nouveau driver, which is completely open source. So this is kind of a mixture of both. That being said, the R550 driver is out, and it is out as stable. But one of the changes is the driver is now certified for GeForce and workstation use using the open source kernel modules. before only the data center was certified. So when you install the driver on a GeForce card with the open source modules, you had to use a switch that enabled unsupported GPUs. That is no longer needs to be used because they are certified now. The open source kernel modules are not up to full parity though. So right now, G-Sync doesn't work yet, and VRAM is not preserved across power management. So, but other than that, they're right in there. The dual licensed MIT/GPL version 2 open drivers, they continue to be synced on GitHub. And while those installing the NVIDIA driver package directly can pass the -m equals kernel-open switch for opting to use the open source kernel drivers. So they're not the default. So when you install an NVIDIA driver, you have to use that switch to be able to actually pull in the open source version. So that all being out of the way, I know some people are saying, get on with it. What's the results? If I had a drum roll sound, I wouldn't use it because they're almost identical and not a lot to talk about. Or you could say that's extremely impressive.
That's what I'm going to say. That is the big news because the open source stuff on video card drivers has been behind for so long, particularly on NVIDIA.
Correct. So the GPU compute, gaming, power figures, they all were in the level of noise. Michael thought, now he didn't really check this, but he thought there might be a slight reduction in power when the cards were at idle, but he wasn't sure. He didn't really dig into it, and it kind of sounded like, oh, maybe there's a slight, very tiny, though maybe that could be attributed to the missing G-Sync and VRAM persistence features. But it was very, very small and only when idle, and so it kind of was lost in the noise of everything else. Michael does go on to ponder on if or when are they going to switch to the default to be the open source kernel modules for the consumer hardware, and maybe sometime in the future only the open source modules will be where they enable new GPUs. So everything just goes to that. They have one set of code to update, and they don't have to worry about the closed source anymore. Time will tell, and I know there's still a lot of closed source parts to the entire driver, but it's better than it was. And this is a step in the right direction by getting them certified.
Indeed. So I have to wonder, is there a game plan for actually landing these in the kernel?
There is talk about that. It's a little early yet. They are still, for anybody listening, they still are considered out of tree, but I think they're going to wind up in there.
I
eventually.
hope so. That's going to be that is going to be a real game changer for using NVIDIA hardware with Linux, because it is such a pain to have out of tree drivers, whether they're open or closed. Honestly, out of tree drivers is a huge pain. But when you get them in the tree, you kind of then have that guarantee that the next kernel version, bleeding edge or what have you, it's not going to horrendously break it because something inside the kernel has changed, because you then have the kernel maintainers also looking at it and sort of responsible for making sure it doesn't break too badly.
And being certified, that was kind of a big step right there to say, okay, now we're actually feeling good about the state of the code for the modules.
Indeed. It's real interesting.
My guess is when they stop making money on a particular set of GPUs is when they'll be available for putting into the kernel tree.
No, that's not quite how they work.
Yeah, I don't think so. Because they are making money, and you have to think so. Why are they doing this? Why is NVIDIA looking at this? And I'm going to say for sure that one of the reasons is the same sort of story as what we just talked about with the Tiny Corp and their tiny boxes doing AI on them, and how things are broken for them with the AMD drivers. Well, it's going to be the exact same sort of thing. You've got people out there that want to do, X, Y, and Z. I want to do open source machine learning, or I want to do some sort of gaming thing, but on a big enterprise scale. And so the reason that they are doing this is because NVIDIA has customers that want to buy thousands and thousands of GPUs that are telling them it really sucks to have to use out-of-tree kernel drivers. That is why. I don't know the exact details, but I'm telling you, that is why. It comes down to the money for NVIDIA, because that's the way their business works. It's the way all businesses work, really. But it comes down to that. They've got a customer somewhere that says, man, it would be really nice if there was an open source kernel driver for this. It would make our business a lot easier. It would make it way easier for us to buy your hardware. And at that point, NVIDIA says, oh, we can actually make money doing this. And then they're willing to invest in it. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
So Juno Computers went to NVIDIA and said, we want to buy X number of GPUs to put in our laptops and run Linux on them. That may help.
I don't think it was Juno Computers. I think it's was, I don't have any insider information, but it was something like Facebook went to them, or Google went to them, or Microsoft went to them and said, or Amazon went to them and said, hey, we would love to build out Azure, AWS, the cloud of computers that runs Meta and Facebook. We would love to be able to build this out with NVIDIA hardware, but we also want to be able to run new kernel versions, and we can't afford the downtime of you being behind. Or maybe it was one of those people doing something and said, we want to run Wayland and your Wayland support sucks. I don't know, but it was something like that. It was a big company.
So keep in mind a couple things. So one is the home users of Linux. That's some of the people running those big data centers. They're, so they have a personal vested interest not to just have data center, but have workstation and PC type stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, no insider information here, but like when you have these data centers, they're buying semis worth of cards, and they're not buying just like normal, you think a 4090 is expensive. You start getting into the H and the industrial series and the Bs.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're taking wicked amounts of power and they're spending wicked amounts of money on them. So they're writing checks way bigger than even like Dell or HP are writing. Mm-hmm. And when they have these contracts for like AI and Google and whoever else, yeah, they have a vested interest to listen to their customer, because if you have one of those big customers jump ship to Team Red or Team Blue, mm-hmm. that's a huge loss, and they don't want that. The other thing I want to bring up is the way the driver works too. When you said like when they're not making money on the cards, NVIDIA runs with a unified driver. So like the current driver supports cards back to, and I don't know off the top of my head, but it's like I think back in the 900 series, or maybe even the 700 series.
It's several generations back, yeah.
Yeah. So even when they've long since quit selling that card, the current driver is still supporting them. Now, they do have legacy drivers for the even older hardware that you can grab, but the way the driver works, whether they are selling them or not really has no bearing on if they would release something. It's all about keeping their hardware and their software secure, so that other companies do not see what they're doing, how they're handling the calculations in CUDA, how they're handling the Vulkan calculations. They're not tipping their hat to the hardware that they have, though you could argue because of the complexity of the hardware, it's not, whatever you'd learn in software is such a small minor part that you're not going to change the course of the direction you've already got, because we've talked about this before, where you have several generations of hardware already in the pipeline. So to suddenly see, hey, AMD or NVIDIA is doing this other company, we want to copy that. It's going to take years before mm-hmm. they could even try to implement something. And by then it's already kind of late to jump on the hardware changes.
Yeah. I just had an interesting thought. I wonder if, or how much this has to do with automotive use, because that is one of the markets that you're seeing a lot of growth in right now is, well, let's take Tesla, for instance, and they are looking to build fully self-driving vehicles, whether you think they're ever going to do it or not. That's what they're trying to do. And they are using Linux and NVIDIA together. And when you get into that world, you also start talking about things like the real-time kernel. And that's one of those places where proprietary and out-of-tree drivers get to be real pains, because things tend to break when you have the real-time stuff turned on. And I can't help but wondering if there's even some like even automotive use for some of these that is driving some of this change.
It very well could be, because they are going into automotive applications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the big markets for NVIDIA right now. Interesting.
They're all pushing.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's also another very high profit market segment versus, laptops, home consumer falls a little more in general. Now there's video cards are kind of a little bit different on that, but a consumer or a commodity type market.
Yeah. Well, Ken was trying to get at it, and he's got a story about Juno computers, and apparently they do have NVIDIA cards. And I don't think this is the NVIDIA changes are not for Juno computers, but maybe Juno computer users will be able to benefit from them too. Why don't you take it and tell us, Ken?
I'm hoping they will. But we're hearing from Marius Lester about Linux hardware vendor Juno Computers releasing their latest Linux-powered laptop, the Neptune 17 version 6. It features a 17.3-inch Mate display with QHD, that's 2560 by 1440 resolution, 240 hertz refresh rate, wide view angle, 100% DCI-P3 and G-Sync. The 6th generation Neptune 17 notebook is powered by a 14th generation Intel Core Raptor Lake i9-1490HX, 14900HX, 45 watt with a maximum capability of 157 watts, TDP processor with 24 cores, 32 threads, Intel UHD graphics, and up to a 5.8 gigahertz clock speed with turbo.
Wow.
Sounds like a powerful system there.
Yeah, it does.
Now you can choose between the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4080 graphics card with 12 gigabyte GDDR RAM, 6 VRAM, and 7424 CUDA cores, or the more powerful NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4090 with 16 gigabyte GDDR6 VRAM and 9,728 CUDA cores. He also mentions that all the video ports are controlled by the dedicated NVIDIA GPU. The laptop offers the following connections: for wireless at Intel 6E AX211, that's for the wireless Wi-Fi, 2.5 gigahertz Ethernet, Bluetooth 5.0, 2 USB-A 3.2 Gen 2 ports. One's a powered USB port. One's a Thunderbolt 4 USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 port with DisplayPort and power delivery. One Thunderbolt 4 or USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 port with DisplayPort. A mini DisplayPort 1.4. That's NVIDIA only. A HDMI output port with HDCP, again NVIDIA only, as well as 3.5 millimeter headphone and microphone jacks. You can max the memory and storage out with 64 gigabytes of 4800 megahertz RAM and 6 terabyte M.2 PCIe Gen 4x4 SSD. The Neptune 17 version 6 laptop comes pre-installed with either Ubuntu 22.04, so you get an LTS, or the latest Ubuntu 23.10, Mantic Minotaur, everybody, for your operating system. For the rest of the information, you can always follow the show note link to Marius' article, unless you like hearing me stumble over all these numbers.
This thing is a beast. It's definitely in the desktop replacement category, maybe even what you would call a mobile workstation. I did not know that such computers were made and shipped with Ubuntu. That is pretty impressive.
Yeah,
Though I'd hate to look at the price for it.
I mean, it's not cheap. It is $3,099. Their website
Yeah,
is
let's just say 4,000.
I'm still gonna have to pass. I mean, they don't even have AMD yet, and Nvidia is not quite there. It's getting there, as we heard from Jeff, but it's not quite there yet. So I'm gonna have to pass on this one for now.
Yeah.
Jeff, you think you'd drop the money on it?
I would not. I would want I get the use case, right? Portable workstation, desktop replacement, so you don't have a big computer. My laptop needs are more portability.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't need much GPU. I want a little more CPU and a little more RAM. And I want like longer battery life. So that 4090 is not going to
battery.
What?
Thin and light and long battery life.
Yep.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm at my desktop.
Right. For my personal needs, for what?
In other words, you'd like a portable thin client?
Mm-hmm. No.
Troll, you're almost describing a Chrome OS at that point. So this would be great for, I guess, two different kinds of people. One would be the gamer that wants to be able to go to the LAN parties, if those still exist anymore, or for somebody that wants to be able to run Blender on the road. So fun times.
I think with our global internet, they're WAN parties now.
Yeah. Every day is WAN party day.
Quippy had a question in the Discord. Are dedicated Linux laptops more or less expensive than Windows laptops? I would say it kind of depends. If you have kind of the custom hardware route, it's going to be a little more expensive. But if you're running very standard hardware, I would say it's a little less expensive because you're not paying the Windows license. But it's there's not much difference though.
I think to clarify on that, the differentiation is if you are getting a laptop that's from a vendor that does specifically Linux laptops and doesn't even provide Windows, they tend to be more expensive. Now, if you're going to like Dell and you build your thing and everything's the same and you just change Windows to Linux or no operating system, you save a little bit. It's not much though.
Yeah. Well, I think that's mainly because your boutique Linux only guys, they do such small volumes that they're not able to get the huge discounts on parts and builds and such. So
yeah, because really computer hardware, for most of it, if you're not talking enterprise or anything like that, you're talking pennies of profit on stuff. I mean, and if hey, Dell buys 3 railroad cars full of memory, they get a discount versus, some of the boutique places that buy 1,000 modules,
And you even have things like a big place like Dell or HP might be able to actually make that laptop in-house, design it themselves, in some cases do the building of it themselves. Whereas your little Linux places, most of them, no, they're repurchasing a design and a build from somebody else, a name that you may not have ever heard of as a consumer, but that industry folks will know. So, I mean, you have places like Sager laptops. They build a lot of things and you may not have ever heard of them. So there's a lot of those different things that kind of go into where your price point's going to end up. Let's move along and let's talk about yet another desktop environment. And who else to talk about it but Rob?
So it wasn't long ago I was all anti-Wayland. I don't know, a year ago, maybe it's been a little longer, I don't remember. But once these guys here, once they converted me, I became a strong believer in Wayland. And bashing any desktop environment that wasn't working towards Wayland. As you know, I would bash them as kind of living in the past, kind of like the colors of OpenSUSE's choice for their default KDE install. So some more popular desktop environments I had advised against after becoming a Wayland convert. because I thought they would never go Wayland, included Cinnamon, Mate, and XFCE. But all those are at least testing and already working their way towards Wayland. Not all in yet, but they're on the path and getting there. So I've kind of had to ease up on that a little bit. So what was left? Well, there was LXQt or LXQT, but doesn't seem to be a massively popular desktop environment these days. It kind of was more years ago. So, I never really bothered to rag on the fact that they're definitely never going to support Wayland. A niche little desktop environment like LXQt, I figured they'd just kind of drift into obscurity as X went away, and that would be the end of them. Well, this week, the LXQt project tweeted that they are now 100% Wayland ready. And this is thanks to Layer Shell Qt. Layer Shell Qt is a component that allows applications to easily use client based on WLR layer shell. And it provides support for the Layer Shell Wayland extension protocol. Once merged, that pull request closes an issue tracker over full Wayland support for the LXQt desktop. So it seems like they've went from nothing to boom, all ready to go way faster than the others have. I guess, it's yet to be seen as it's tested, but they're all ready. And, before I even read Michael Larable's words on his article, I was thinking this myself, but he said it too. 2024 is certainly looking like the year of the Wayland desktop on Linux systems.
Definitely.
So did any of us, I feel like this is something I would have predicted, but did any of us have any Wayland predictions for 2024? I don't remember.
I think sort of accidentally, as it's sort of in passing, some of us talked about it. I've talked to some people about this, and apparently one of the things that's happening is one of the last big companies that is paying for X11 support is Red Hat, and their distro, the version of RHEL that actually officially supports X11 is about to be retired. And so the last of the funding for actually fixing security bugs for X11 is about to go away. And that apparently is a thing that is known by people doing desktops, because there's been a lot of them that are going, okay, yeah, it's time. We really need to get away from X11, and we need to do it in a hurry. So to those who know, it was apparently easy to predict.
But it's still X is still in their upstream of Fedora, but not as default, and in the near future, maybe not at all. So yeah, and that's going to trickle down into RHEL. And
X11 hasn't had any real updates for quite a while. I mean, there's been a few little tweaks and bug fixes, but for the most part, development was halted, a couple of years ago?
If not longer than that, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while. So at some point, X is going to kind of just quit working as well, or something's going to break, and it's going to be, we're done. So.
Yeah, at some point, eventually, there will be a severe security problem found that just never gets fixed. Now, how many years it takes for that to actually happen, I don't know. It'll probably depend upon how complicated the problem is, right? So if it's an easy fix, then somebody will do it just in their spare time, if nothing else. But if you get into actual complicated, complex security problems, and you don't have engineers that are getting paid to fix it, it may take a while, and it's one of the things that big companies like having those guarantees And that's one of the things that Red Hat is providing right now for X11 is kind of that guarantee that, well, if there's a big security problem, yes, we will fix it and make sure there's a fix available. And as that is going away, it makes it less tenable really to use it.
Yeah. At least listening to the developers, most of the code in X11 is not simple, or it's all very convoluted and complex. And
Yep.
But in this list of desktop environments that have all been falling into Wayland, there's several there I never thought would. XFCE, LXQt, never thought they would. Mm-hmm. And now it's pretty much, you got the major ones at least are all in there. But there are still a lot of other really lightweight ones out there that I can't even remember what they're all called. But, I wonder if they're going to come along. Some of those that are like in a tiny core Linux or DSL Linux, those used JW something or other, and some really lightweight ones. I wonder if those are going to go to, or
well, they're probably either going to get fixed or they're going to get replaced.
Yeah,
someone's going to come along with a new lightweight Wayland desktop, or they're going to say, you know what, it's worth putting the effort in. And
yeah, and you've got projects like WL Roots, for instance, which is kind of part of Sway, but because of the way WL Roots is written, a lot of projects have used that kind of as their under the hood Wayland implementation and just build on top of WL Roots. I've got the page pulled up here of projects which use WL Roots, and this is old, by the way. This is a couple of years old. This list is, and it's a bunch of them, and like you say, a bunch of them that you've just never heard of because they're tiny in their boutique. But there's a lot of them here that are doing stuff with it. And there's a couple here that you have heard of. I think Sway is probably the biggest, but there's some others that you are not entirely unknown. But there's these other projects that are intended to make that burden a little lighter of switching to Wayland. That helps too.
Well, so WL Roots must be the WLR layer shell that I had previously mentioned.
I don't know that it's the same. It may
or
be
is
that
that
there
a shim to it?
There is maybe yet another project that is looking to do the same thing. I'm not sure. It does have that WL, but
WLR even.
It's okay. It's very possible they are. One is built on top of the other. That's probably pretty likely, huh?
The one good thing about this is it does mean that NVIDIA's got to work more on at least sharing some of their opening up some of their drivers to work with Wayland better.
Yeah, it kind of makes it untenable where NVIDIA just sort of sits on their hands and say, we're not willing to work with Wayland. Although they have gotten better about that over the last couple of years. That particular beef, I feel like, got settled.
There's a community willing to help them. Not me, that's a little advanced for me, but there's plenty out there who would love to work on that code and make it
absolutely.
better.
Jeff, would you be willing to test it?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure. So speaking of testing, there is the weekly update in KDE, and this one got some publicity for maybe not quite the right reason. So it's called This Week in KDE, a deluge of new features. And I think some people read that and thought features means bugs. And it's fairly easy to understand why, because his second paragraph, Nate's second paragraph here, it says, not just that. So the first paragraph is the floodgates are fully open and developers have started landing juicy new features for Plasma 6.1. Second paragraph. But not just that, we ask for bug reports, and you folks gave us bug reports. Usually we get 30 to 50 today, but now we're up to 150 to 200. And I feel like some people just stopped reading the article there and have gone out and said, oh no, there's 150 to 200 new bugs in KDE every day. It's terrible. The sky is falling. It's like, hang on just a bit. Let's talk about what this means first. And he says most of the reports are actually not KDE issues at all. They are either graphics drivers issues, bugs in themes, bugs in third-party apps, and a lot of them are duplicates. All right. So the sorts of things that we're talking about here, like for instance, the KDE tiling manager that I use on the computer behind me for the longest time did not work in KDE 6. In fact, I finally buckled down and wrote the patch to make it work in KDE 6 because the something in the extensions changed, and so it needed a little update. So I'm sure they got a bunch of bug reports for things like that, where extensions just hadn't been updated yet. So all this to say, the rollout of KDE 6 has actually gone fairly well. It has been mostly bug-free for a lot of people, KDE 6 itself, but as one might expect, you're seeing bugs get found in other programs and in drivers because we are suddenly doing new things. There's a really interesting bug. I don't think anybody else is going to talk about it. So there's a really interesting bug here that it's sort of not a bug, but it is a bug. If you go to run anything with Plasma 6, KDE 6 in, say, VirtualBox, it's not going to work. And the reason is that in VirtualBox, you get a really old and outdated software rendering graphics pipeline. And there are things in KDE 6 that it just doesn't support. So again, from Nate here at Pointed Stick, he has the previous blog post is a PSA that says, if you're trying to review KDE 6 in a VirtualBox virtual machine and it doesn't work for you, you need to go find the Enable 3D acceleration button and check that, and that will make all the things work again. It also enables all of the fancy graphical effects you would expect on a bare metal installation. So it's fun to me. It's annoying at the time, sure, but it's fun to me to see as you push forwards the state of the Linux desktop and KDE in particular, how that process sort of reveals where things are old or broken or buggy in other projects. And, hopefully we get to the point where we're fixing all of them together.
So I wonder, is that simply just a VirtualBox bug, or do you know if that affects other hypervisors?
I would expect that to affect other hypervisors, honestly, because a lot of those have some shared code. So I don't know for sure. For example, if you were to do it in QEMU and then like libvirt, if you would have the same problem. I haven't tried it yet, but it's very possible that you might.
Well, since I believe KDE 6 is available for OpenSUSE, I'll have to give it another shot. Yeah. And for that, these days, I'm using Proxmox, which is QEMU.
Yeah. So you may have to go find a 3D accelerator setting and turn it on, which is fun that actually sort of works now, because I know for the longest time that didn't. You had people doing crazy things like having 2 GPUs in their system and sending one through to the virtual machine. Fun stuff.
And remember, KDE is very customizable, Rob. You can get rid of that old Windows 95, 98, and you can upgrade to an NT 3.51 look.
So I know.
So just so you
customize it a lot.
Just so our listeners know, there is a KDE store, and I don't think there's anything that is actually for sale on the KDE store, but there are just many, many, many themes and desktop backgrounds and color theming and all kinds of other stuff, add-ons, extension scripts. And so let's look. Plasma themes. And so this is going to be like your entire desktop theme. Plasma themes. There are 845 of those to choose from on the KDE store. So you can have anything from the Windows 11 white plasma theme all the way to shades of purple plasma. Your choice.
Yeah, you can spend a lot of time just playing with themes. And
yes.
And then once you load a theme, you can tweak pieces of it. If you like, I really like this theme, but I hate the way the pointer looks, and you can fix that.
Yeah.
And I'll say back when I used KDE, I used to always tweak my system a lot, all kinds of themes and whatever, this and that. But
and it's
GNOME is so close to where I just like it. I just a couple little things and I'm good.
It's worth saying also with KDE with 6.0, there are some like theme features that didn't make it, but they are working on for 6.1 or later versions. So things like automatically updating your desktop wallpaper from time to time. I think that's one my wife is going to like because she uses currently the NASA picture of the day for one of her desktop backgrounds. And I think that is a feature that got dropped and is coming back, and they're working on it right now. So there's some of that stuff too. So if you try 6.0 and it's missing something, then, by the time 6.1 comes around, it may be there.
In GNOME, I'm currently using the extension, the Bing wallpaper.
Well,
I'm pretty boring. I've just got the regular pretty much out of the box. Other than I turn on the dark feature, dark mode.
Dark mode.
I had the out of the box for years, but I gave this a shot. And I mean, it's not like you can tell it's Microsoft. It's just a nice landscape picture. So you just forget that it's
He
Bing.
put his Linux computer in Bing mode.
Hey, I'm running Edge too, so.
Yeah, see, I was gonna say, I want to say Fedora and the Kubuntu have been both very colorful, kind of more abstract-y backgrounds. Not So that's a SUSE setup there.
Yeah, Fedora's had that as sort of their overall theme for a while.
I wasn't talking about the background, Jeff. I was talking about the color of like the panel and the title bar and all that stuff.
Still, it can be whatever color you want it to. It can be shiny.
Look, I just had PTSD when I looked at that. I was like,
oh, goodness. All right. So there's a birthday to celebrate, Jeff, right?
There is. And let's go back in time a little bit. 2004 was a heck of a Linux year. At the time, SCO was trying to kill Linux. SCO, for those who don't know, was a bunch of lawyers trying to make money being patent trolls. Red Hat decided they weren't going to pay much attention to those home users as they shut down Red Hat Linux 9. And, they started something. I don't know if it ever really went anywhere. RHEL or Red Hat Enterprise Linux, I kid, it took off in enterprise circles and a lot of other areas. But then there was an astronaut with millions in the bank that thought he would start up a company called Canonical and make his own Linux distribution. Mark Shuttleworth made a lot of money selling his certificate authority company and happened to be a Debian developer. So Canonical Ltd was founded in the UK in 2004. Now, of course, they're the mother company of Ubuntu. And as many know, the name Ubuntu comes from the Zulu phrase, Umuntu Numanuku Nagbantu. And it doesn't translate to what we normally think of, that we hear it is, but it's the modern meaning outside of Linux circles actually comes from the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. In his book, No Future Without Forgiveness, he said, someone with Ubuntu is open and available to others, affirming of others. So that's kind of the history of how the name translated to what it is now. The first version of Ubuntu was 4.10 Warty Warthog. And as most of our audience knows, Ubuntu comes out with a new version every 6 months. And except for the 6.06 version, they have all come out on time for the last 20 years. Now, the goal of Ubuntu, according to Shuttleworth, was to make Ubuntu a Linux for the people, for the end users. And you can argue they did or didn't achieve that, depending on your proclivities, with things like their various desktops and snaps and whatnot. They have tried to drive the future of Linux as well, but some were, not the hit they hoped, again, such as the Unity desktop, which they worked on from 2011 until they gave up on it in 2017. And currently you can't say Canonical without saying Snap and the feelings that brings, both positive and negative. Funny thing, though, is while it started for the people, for the common person, it's actually the #1 cloud operating system. And, they had an effect in the Linux world, too, is there are a ton of distributions which are based off of Ubuntu. So it's not like they haven't had a big influence in the Linux world. Personally myself, the install of Ubuntu, the first one I did was, I think 6.06 was my first one. And it was amazing. Linux's before that, there was a lot of going in and manually setting up files and config files. And it was a several hour process. And I first put on Ubuntu and it was like, wow, it's installed. It works. Holy cow. It was surprising, so it got me into Linux. I was in it before, but it really kicked off my enthusiasm, we'll say. So, you know what? Happy birthday, Canonical. And I hope to see you around in another 20 years.
I would agree with that. I think the world needs Canonical. We don't necessarily need Snaps, but we need Canonical.
Yeah, what positive feelings does Snaps bring to who?
Thanos.
To a lot of people, because you can snap things that are deep in the core of the system that you can't do with Flatpaks.
Indeed.
Snaps keep my pants up.
So, I did not know that Shuttleworth was the founder of Thought. I remember back in the day when you went back before Let's Encrypt was a thing, and it was difficult to get certificates. That Thought was one of the big players in that, and apparently he sold it to VeriSign for a lot of money, like $550 million US, which is almost $1 billion now, and that's where he really made his money and was able to go and do things like booking a flight to the International Space Station.
So, what was your first Linux that really got you into it, Jonathan? It was Fedora when you were a teenager, wasn't it? That's what you said.
Yeah, and I don't know that teenager's quite right. It would have been either late teens or early 20s. But it was one of the Fedora cores, like Fedora Core 3 or Fedora Core 4. So that would have been probably right around senior year of high school, somewhere in there.
What about you, Ken?
What was Ken's first Linux?
Mandrake. Purchased a CD for about $2 that had Mandrake Linux on it. Basically the cost of the CD.
Mm-hmm.
My first was Slackware in about 1999. And then I did Mandrake at some briefly. I hopped around to like Mandrake, Lindows, Xandros, Red Hat. And then I went back to Slackware for quite a while. And then I went to Ubuntu sometime, probably around 2010-ish, give or take a year or two. Mm-hmm. Then I was there until only a few years ago.
What I really liked about Linux when I tried out Mandrake was the fact I've been running this for more than 6 months and I don't need to reinstall
it. Jeff?
Oh, I was going to say my first one was Caldera probably about 98. I was running KDE 1 something, and I remember compiling KDE 2.0 and running it on there.
Yup. All right. So speaking of Linux distros, we've got one from, the name of it would make me think it's from 2017. I think they may not be up with the way that all the cool kids are naming their release versions. Ken, tell us about Zorin.
Well, what I'm going to be telling you, I've got from Bobby Borisov and Mars Nestor, who both wrote about Zorin OS latest iteration, which is Zorin 17.1. Bobby points out that Zorin 17, the previous release, reached an impressive milestone. It achieved over 500,000 downloads in just over 2 months, with a significant 78% of these downloads originating from proprietary platforms like Windows and Mac OS. I think that's how that's said.
Yep.
They both talk about key updates in Zorin OS 17.1, focusing on bolstering its appeal to Windows users. Enhanced window app support is at the forefront of this release, making it simpler for users to run their favorite applications and games, regardless of their original development platform. To simplify the transition, it introduces improved Windows app support. Zorin's OS 17.1's enhanced capability is powered by the latest Wine 9.0 version, significantly improving Windows software support. Additionally, the introduction of bottles allows users to run Windows apps in a sandboxed environment. Marius points out that Zorin OS will now prompt users to install the native Linux version of apps that users attempt to launch using the Windows installers for these apps. Zorin OS stays true to its goal of being the go-to Linux distro for Windows and Mac OS users who want to migrate to Linux. Bobby points out Zorin OS 17.1 also introduces support for a broader array of hardware thanks to the Linux kernel and graphics stack updates that it's received. Both articles cover how to upgrade if you do want to try it.
It has been around since 2009, the first release of Zorin OS. That is, it's actually fairly impressive. It's a long time in Linux years.
I think if they really want to make it more Windows compatible, they should put at least I think they have a paid version of Zorin, and they should put the crossover by Codeweaver's version of Wine in there. Yeah. I know that's what Lindo's did that, and I feel like Xander's might have actually had that too.
Yeah, interesting. The neat thing that I heard there was that if you go to install the exe of something that is available natively, it'll just kind of redirect you over to the native install. I think that's neat. So like, for example, somebody goes to download LibreOffice, you get the LibreOffice exe, and the system sees that, and how about we install the right version of that for you? I think that's a cool feature.
That's cool.
Like that.
Yeah,
I like that a lot. All right. Well, fun. It sounds like that's the distro to put grandma on. Okay. Well, Rob, what is Pooter, and why would we want to put Pooter on a computer? I feel weird just saying that.
So I titled this Pooter on your Pooter, which is Pooter on your computer. And for those of you who apparently don't pay attention to my tips, Pooter is reference to a tip I had, I don't know, must have been a few months ago, a fun little thing going to Pooter.com, and that was just a web-based OS. And let me just transition here. So for those who are watching here, you can see Pooter running right here. And so I already demoed this a few months ago. But what is cool here is before you had to go to Pooter.com, this week, the developer open sourced the Pooter environment. So now you can easily install that on your own computer or server and run this yourself. So if you notice here, if anybody who's watching, I am not at Pooter.com. I am at 192.168.1.213 :4000. Because I am running that on one of my OpenSUSE VMs right now. And all I had to do to install that is a simple git space clone space https://github.com/heypooter/pooter to get the code from the Pooter guy, and then cd Pooter to go into that Pooter directory, and then npm install, and then npm start. And within all that took me like 1, maybe 2 minutes. With that, after that, boom, I had Pooter running on my Pooter. And so it tells you go to localhost :4000, and it takes you to it locally. But I wanted to try it from another somewhere else on my network. So that's why you see me going to the IP there, because I'm trying it somewhere else. I'm going to say, being new to OpenSUSE, I had a little bit of issues opening up the port for it because it was blocking port 4000. So if you install this and then try to get to it from somewhere else, make sure your Linux firewall isn't blocking it. Side tip, it uses firewall D and OpenSUSE, and I had to go into YAST and edit the firewall settings. But that's for another day, I guess. So pooter on your pooter, it gets a lot more interesting because, I think before, I don't know if anyone said it, but maybe some of the concerns were is you're on somebody else's pooter and you don't know. You can't trust it to put stuff on there because who knows what they're doing with it and whatever. But like now, the site kind of explains you could use this kind of like a thin client environment where you can have your users on there, you can save documents on there, you can do all kinds for what it is, you can do all kinds of things. And I don't know if running that all from his website for free was even sustainable. And now it's just code, so I picture it having much longer sustainability and maybe becoming a much cooler project in the future. So that is Pooter, and I will put the notes in the notes how to install it too.
Cool. I'm fascinated where that might go because I can see the ability to run this sort of pseudo desktop from any other computer. I don't know, there might be some use case for that where it's more than just a toy. Because
kiosk.
Let's be honest, it's kind of just a toy right now. But yeah, I could see, and maybe kiosk, maybe that is a use case for it. That's actually a pretty interesting use case too. There's some fascinating potential there. I think that's pretty cool.
Maybe be used as an alternative to Google Drive.
Yeah. Well, so that too, you can use it. You can use it for that sort of thing. Really, what comes to mind to me that it reminds me of is it's sort of like Nextcloud OwnCloud, with a fancier interface. So I don't know. Maybe the next thing that we'll see is somebody doing the Pooter as an extension for Nextcloud. That would be fun.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a site, the way it describes it is Pooter is an advanced open source desktop environment in the browser designed to be feature rich, exceptionally fast, and highly extensible. It can be used to build remote desktop environments or serve as an interface for cloud storage services, remote servers, web hosting platforms, and more.
So the next thing we need is for somebody to figure out a way to run Pooter directly on Wayland.
Pooter on just written in vanilla JavaScript, so that should make it easier, right?
I would hope so.
Right, it's using Node.js, so you could, have that be your actual desktop environment.
That's awesome. That's hilarious.
Replacing KDE or GNOME or whatever else completely.
What fun. All right. So last week I started talking about the process of resizing a disk image. And this is all because I've got a virtual machine, which is where backups get stored, and I ran out of space. And so last week we had resized the .img file on the physical disk. And so we resized the .img, which that is the equivalent of making the virtual hard drive itself bigger. The next thing that we need to do in this process is to make the data partition bigger. And the way that I found that I prefer to do this with is through Parted, or Parted, maybe it's the partition editor. And so last week we finished by mounting that .img on a loop device. And so now we have /dev/loop0. We can open that in Parted. And there's something really interesting that I think will save you some grief if you understand this. Parted refers to things using the binary bytes as opposed to the regular way that bytes are counted. So I assume a lot of our listeners know this, but So what is 1K? You can ask, what is 1K? Is it 1,000 bytes or is it 1024 bytes? And so the binary 1K is 1024 bytes, whereas the way that 1K normally gets talked about, particularly by, let's say, the way your system measures your hard drive space, is as if 1K was 1,000 bytes. So when you compare like the output of part ed to the output of fdisk, they're going to say different things. That is why. All right. Now, the command that we want to run is actually really, really simple. So we open loop 0 in part ed, and then we simply say, the command is resize part, and then you tell it the partition number. And in my case, it was partition number 2. And then rather than messing with math or anything, you can just say, resize it to 100%, and it will make it as big as possible. And that takes the partition and grows it so that now your partition, you don't have any free space after your partitions. We're still not done. We will come back next week for the next step. But parted, it is, in my opinion, the easiest way to do it, because it actually has a resize part command, whereas fdisk doesn't have a resize command. So you have to like delete the partition and recreate it, which is scary with real data. So Jeff is up next.
Yes. So mine is a little open source program called Dosage. Basically, this app is to help you keep up with your medications. It's open source based on JavaScript for the most part, or I mean Java for the most part. It's in many languages. It's got, like, for example, English, Spanish, Hindi, Turkish, Indian, Russian, and many more. And its basic function, it's make sure you take your pills. So it's got medication history, so it can keep track of when you've taken your pills and for how long, and things like that. Medication frequency. You need this once a day, twice a day, 2 times a week, whatever it is. And inventory management. So, if you got certain medications you can't afford to miss, and that's where you can get things up in the program to manage your inventory. So then you hit maybe a 10-day supply, and depending on how easily it is to get your medication, it'll send you, it'll show you warnings like, hey, your inventory is getting low. We need to reorder this. We need to refill, so you won't get caught without any of your medication. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of customizations that you can do. You can, it automatically gives you your units. Is it a pill, ml, GM, whatever. You can put notes, so you can say like maybe after or before a meal. You can, there's tons of ways that you can have it keep track of things for you, and you can make it kind of look how you want it to be. So if you ever need something to keep track of medications, give Dosage a shot and see if it's going to do what you need.
Yeah, that looks really cool. I'm assuming it will also keep a history so that you can tell if you ever missed one, which can be very important when you're sitting at the doctor's office and your blood work does not show what they think it should. You can say, well, okay, yeah, I did miss 3 times this month. Oh, well, that might explain it.
Yep. So there is that functionality in it.
Good stuff.
Do you know if that's purely a desktop app, or is there a database or anything behind that? Or
it seems like it would be great for mobile, doesn't it?
Yeah, or even to be able to access it mobily. Even if you like do all your management on the desktop, it'd be really nice to be able to get that on the go. Some basic information.
The link has a it's got the GitHub. The GitHub repo is available. Source available, so it only shows downloads on FlatHub and the Snap Store, but that seems like that would be a pretty solid win to get that on, say, the iOS store and the Play Store and make it all talk together. You can definitely see it. All right.
Yep.
Ken is up next, and Ken, what do you have for us?
Well, this week I wanted to share how I'm using the test command that we introduced back in episode 44 to address some error messages that I was getting when I would log in from my Raspberry Pi into my Lenovo ThinkPad. Here, I'll show you what the message is. I may get my fingers on the right keys.
You are typing a password in live on air. You are very brave.
I know it's not going to show it. And I haven't set up the authentication key yet from this system. But for those of y'all watching the video, y'all just saw me log in, do an SSH into my Lenovo ThinkPad, and it's coming up giving me these fuser mount messages. Well, that's because of some commands I've got in my profile that's run that works fine when I'm on the Lenovo and booting up on the Lenovo ThinkPad itself. But what I had to do was find a way to test for when I'm logging in from an SSH to prevent that from running, which had remarked out earlier. Basically, I'm using the test command to test for an empty variable, in this case, the SSH underscore client, that's all in caps, that it gives you what the SSH client is, that you're coming from is when you're logging in via SSH. So I've got that test set wrapped around the code that I don't want to run when I log in. And let's go ahead and save that. And I'm lazy. I prefer to do an exit instead of log out.
Fewer characters to type.
Yep. And then log back in. And there you see that test prevents those fuser mount commands from actually running when I do it there, because I don't need it from here since it's already done when the system booted up.
Yeah.
And I logged in.
There are a bunch of different subcommands for test. In fact, there's multiple cheat sheets, but the one I'm looking at here, you can test for whether a file exists, test for whether a file is a regular file. You can test whether something is a block device or a character device. You can test whether, the SUID flag is set on a file or whether you are the owner of the file. All sorts of crazy stuff that you can do with the test command. And it's extremely useful.
In fact, we've got the link in the command line tips spreadsheet attached to the first time we went over it.
Yeah, fun stuff. All right. Well, some great tips and some great news, some fun stuff we covered. Thank you guys for being here. I'm going to let each of you get in the last word if you want to. We'll start with Jeff. What do you have?
I got just a little blurb here. You can catch more of me this week on episode 773, Node DB on Floss Weekly. The show titled "Don't Do the Math." So if you want more of me talking, or you need more Jonathan, head on over and check it out. There's a link in the show notes. And other than that, I want everybody to have a great week, and I'll see you next week.
All right, Rob.
And you can catch more of me at robertpcampbell.com. And on that page, you'll find a LinkedIn, a Mastodon link, and a place to donate a coffee to me. So come to my website, connect with me, find out about me, send me a message, say hi, and send me a coffee. And while we're saying hi and chatting, I'll drink that coffee.
There you go. Ken.
I just wanted to mention Barry Bobasov's article about Stat Counter's latest data indicating that Linux's market share has reached 4.03%, which is actually up 1% from 8 months ago.
Yeah, interesting stuff. I saw this as well. Pretty exciting to see that particular stat as it continues to rise, and some fun thoughts about why. Maybe we'll talk about that next week. Great stuff. All right. Thank you to the guys for being here, and thank you for all of you that watched both live and on the download. Don't forget, you can catch more of me over at Hackaday. And we sure appreciate everybody being here, and we will see you next time on the Untitled Linux Show.